Next witness.
Good afternoon to you, or on behalf of the Service Employees International Union. Overall, we are in support of the continuum care reform proposal. Obviously, like the LAO said, the devil is in the details. A couple of things we want to mention that we want to continue to work on is as we look at trying to place youth in family-like settings, obviously the social worker is going to need time to be able to provide that type of service. I think often now, due to caseload, social workers are trying to get through their cases as fast as possible, and they're doing a lot of triage. I would hope that we would free up their time a little bit more, a lot more, in order for them to find that appropriate placement. Another thing I would add before closing is there are emergency shelters that we have members working in today. They are well trained and very committed to this proposal. I would hope that as we shift those shelters in a more therapeutic setting, that we would retain those staff and utilize their expertise as we move forward.
Thank you.
Hi, Leslie Winter, Sonoma County, and I'm a manager, overseer our foster care program. And I'm also here to advocate for the right services and support for our foster families or our relative and kinship caregivers, because we cannot have this continuum of care effort without family settings and being able to support and properly train those families. We really need the resources to do it, and we plea for that. Thank you.
Thank you. Next witness.
Thank you for your work on CCR. My name is Anna Johnston with the National Center for Youth Law. And part of congregate care reform, or the continuum of care reform, one of the biggest issues we see in group home settings is the use of psychotropic medications, as earlier discussed. In the CCR proposals themselves, there's not a lot of detail about how to reform that type of treatment. And so again, without naming what are these treatments that we want to increase with youth, and what do we want to decrease, and again, how do we know that those are medically indicated and safe for children? So again, reiterating our psychotropic package, but also that we do want to see some integration into this reform bill about those treatment practices. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Rochelle Trottenberg, and I'm a former foster youth. And I spent about 5 years in group care, and during that time, I didn't attend public schools. I never went to a grocery store or other types of stores. I didn't have extracurricular activities, and I didn't have access to television or radio or any other social media. And the result of that is a lifetime of learning when you exit care. And so I think the work that CCR is doing is part of helping young people be able to transition into the community and be successful in that transition. And it's the way that we currently incentivize caring for foster children is backwards, because when you're in a group homes get paid more than foster families to provide care, but they're not providing the treatment or the things that really improve the outcomes for young people, like extracurricular activities, spiritual and cultural activities. And so I really want to just say that I support the CCR work that's being done, and I hope that the legislature also supports that work. Because they say it takes a village to raise a kid, but group homes aren't the right village. Thank you.
Thank you. Next witness.
Hi. Good afternoon. My name is Tiffany Frutos. I am a foster parent from Riverside County. I've fostered numerous children. I've adopted 3 of them. I currently have an infant, precious baby boy. I've spent a lot of time encouraging group home teens, mentoring birth families, and I'm here to support more funding for both foster parents and relatives. There's so many good reasons to support this, but a few of them are, based on my experience, every child that has come into my care arrives with nothing. We get a small reimbursement, but it does not cover half of what is needed to care for these kids, and that's just the physical end of it. I mean, these children come with trauma and neglect and night terrors, and sometimes the care is 24 hours. We need time to refuel and be rested for those sleepless nights, and more training for these outbursts that we don't understand. I mean, we need more education and more training to support these children the way that they need to be supported. So many more reasons, but thank you so much for consideration.
Thank you very much for coming today. Next witness.
Hi, my name is Vanessa Hernandez. I'm with California Youth Connection. I'm also a former foster youth. CYC is very supportive of the efforts of CCR, and we're very encouraged in the direction it's moving. We're pleasantly surprised about the conversation, not only about quantity of foster homes, but the quality of these foster homes. CYC would like to see this theme carried forward in different ways and creative solutions, such as a satisfaction evaluation to make sure that these homes really are of quality. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, good afternoon. Excuse me. My name is Sylvia Signore. I am the president of For the Children, a group of foster parents in Riverside County, representing approximately 60 families, over 200 children. And thank you for what you guys are proposing. Totally in support of it. We not only need foster parents desperately, but we need good foster parents. And this would just help us get the children out of the homes. You talk about all these drugs that the children are receiving. In lieu of that, with a little help for the foster parents, we can get them involved more in after-school activities. My husband and I have adopted 8 children out of foster care, and they're all involved in different things, karate, music, all kinds of things. So children do not need drugs. They need to be involved in things. But all of that costs money. And no matter how much you make, it's never enough when you have that many kids. So please help us out so we can continue to help the children.
Thank you very much for traveling up today. Next witness, 1 minute.
Good afternoon. My name is Martha Medina, and I'm also a foster parent. And me and my husband have adopted 5 children that were foster, and we are in the process of adopting our 6th child. We do have 4 biological, so that makes 10. And I am also a former youth foster child, and I have to say that I was raised by a relative that was a very positive outlook in my life. And if it wasn't for her, I wouldn't be here. So the relative placement is something very, very important, because I'm talking about 30 plus years ago. There was nothing. I went through high school working just to get through and do what I wanted to do in school, to be involved in sports. I wanted to do all that. I wanted to be involved. I wanted to be active, and I couldn't do that where I came from. But when my aunt took me in and put that roof over my head and could tell me every day that she loved me, that was it. So the relative placement, I think, is where we are lacking, and I am in support in what you guys are doing. Thank you very much.
Thank you for coming.
Good afternoon. Eva Terrazas with EMQ Families First. We're a mental health and foster care agency that operates in the Bay Area, Los Angeles, San Bernardino, and the Capital Region. We're here to support the FFA social worker rate increase. I think I don't want to duplicate anything that has been mentioned before, but I think it is important to note that it is especially difficult to recruit and retain talent and social workers in areas such as the Bay Area, where the cost of living is one of the highest in the nation. So the competition is extremely high, turnover rate is very high, and now that the economy has gotten better, particularly in the Bay Area, there's so many more job opportunities. So that type of turnover rate is certainly not good for the stability of the children and families we serve, and it's not good for the agency and what we're trying to accomplish with the CCR recommendations. So we're fully in support of the California Alliance proposal for the rate increase, and I urge you to support that.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Last witness.
Good afternoon. My name is Brian Van Ann. I'm the CEO of Transitions Children's Services in Fresno. We are a foster family agency, and I wanted to share with you my support of the continuum care reform, in particular the support of FFA social workers. It'll help us go a long way, and as previously mentioned, recruiting the right social workers to fill the needs of our kids. So thank you.
Thank you very much. So the name of the game is the right people in the right seats on the right bus, from social workers to foster parents, everybody. The old executive management adage applies here as well. Director, you want to respond to question 3? Can you, for me very quickly?
Certainly, it's I mean, our intention that the governor's budget proposals, be viewed as the administration's sort of starting place commitment to implement CCR. The policy bill, we are hoping will be on a similar track, and sort of the fine art of keeping them harnessed together is something we're going to experience.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Okay, let's move on to trailer bill language. I'm going to take the next two up together, and so the public can comment. The approved relative caregiver funding options program cleanup, and the second trailer bill proposal around child near fatality public disclosure, pages 19 and 21 of the agenda.
Madam Chair, Pete Chervinka, Department of Social Services. I'll be brief. As I mentioned when I described in my opening about the ARC program, our Approved Relative Caregiver Program, we do have a piece of trailer bill language. That piece of trailer bill language, because the ARC program is partially supported by CalWORKs funds, there were some additional complications about the county that would have responsibility for making the payment. This language clarifies that. It also clarifies that when we place children and they receive a payment that's partially CalWORKs, that doesn't subject the parent taking or the relative taking care of the child to the CalWORKs fingerprinting requirements. And then, as I mentioned explicitly in my opening, the language also ensures that the total payment received by the relative increases annually by the CNI, not just the general fund portion of their payment growing by that amount. On the second, we apologize to the committee. The administration made a large snafu. The administration proposal for child near fatality language is currently one sentence of intent language to achieve federal conformity. We've engaged both with counties and advocates to try to resolve some issues that haven't so far been able to be resolved in 2 years of prior efforts in the policy track. The reason we are approaching this issue in the trailer bill process this year is because we have funding in the proposed budget for counties to do the near fatality reporting that's required by federal law. We need to achieve that federal conformity in order to issue the funding. But we do not have a language for you to consider at this time. We have one sentence of intent language, but the issues that are laid out in your agenda are accurate in terms of what we're trying to resolve.
So we're going to hold the item open, and then post-May revise, we can talk about the issues on page 25 in terms of how long the state's been out of compliance, all those issues?
Yes, please.
When we take that back up, maybe your more than one sentence can clarify it for us. Going back to the previous item on page 20, can you briefly talk a little bit about what were some of the factors that kept counties from participating in the first year?
I would have to say that this approved relative caregiver program was one of the more complicated programs the department's ever had to do. It crossed child welfare and the CalWORKs program. There were interweaving things there that dealt with the financials. There was complications over the data used to establish the initial funding as it was enacted last year in terms of which children were in which foster care aid codes. I'm getting really arcane. This was incredibly complex. So it complicated folks understanding what their baseline was and how much, therefore, the state would contribute to it and what their financial exposure would be going forward. There were concerns about the automation behind this to issue payments and whether that would have to be a manual process for perpetuity or on a temporary basis. We think we've worked through most of these issues. But it's been very difficult to provide clarity for the counties to make a decision. We think we've resolved those issues, and the trailer bill will help in that regard, but the trailer bill will clean up what we've clarified.
Great. Finance. LAO, any public comment on these two items? As people queue up, I'll ask, this is just kind of a seed for the back of your mind in the future. Since CalWORKs dollars are now being engaged in caregiver, when I ran a child resource and referral AP agency, the top call we would get was from new family caregiver foster care parents who were working, who had stepped up in this circumstance, who were looking for child care assistance and help. Now that we've got CalWORks dollars engaged, I'm wondering if that could potentially be an option in the future. Don't answer now. We'll talk about it later.
We're happy to engage that conversation.
Yeah, because I'm thinking about, you know, CalWORks, entitlement, stage 1. Maybe that's a pathway to provide child care support. First witness, 1 minute, please.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, members. Ed Howard of the University of San Diego School of Law's Children's Advocacy Institute, speaking on the near-death issue. First and foremost, I do want to thank your staff both for the write-up on this proposal, but all of the foster care proposals. They've been really, really excellent. We believe that when a child with CPS involvement possibly is injured or beaten nearly to death, for example, nearly to death, because of possible failures of a child welfare agency, we believe that that commends the same level of soul-searching and reform-prompting public review as when that same child may actually end up dying of their injuries. Since 2007, counties and the department have been complying with a very carefully negotiated state law that does exactly that, that when a child with CPS involvement tragically dies from substantiated abuse and neglect, the public and the press are allowed to look at a few very critical performance documents with all identifying information entirely redacted that reveals whether or not the death was a tragic and unavoidable accident or possibly owing to operational problems within the child welfare agency. And in part because of that law, you've seen very significant operational reforms, both in your county, Madam Chair, as well as in Sacramento County. So we believe that there really isn't any difference in what we can learn when regrettably a child who has CPS involvement dies or is nearly beaten to death. And we very, very much appreciate our work with the department. We look forward to when this item comes back to you to hopefully having a consensus item consistent with what's already been invented.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next witness.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Frank Mecca with CWDA. We principally negotiated with Mr. Howard that carefully crafted language on what the public gets to see when there's the tragedy of a child death. And in doing so, the legislature balanced a couple of imperatives. First is the public's right to know, so that there's sunshine in the reforms that Mr. Howard talked about. Secondly, are the privacy interests of the people associated with that child who are still alive, whose personal sensitive information could be inadvertently released. And so we're trying to balance privacy rights. We do understand that the state has an issue with the federal government with respect to near fatalities. And while the public's interest in knowing about what happens in near fatalities exists, the privacy interests on the other side are even more significantly sensitive because the subject, the child, is still alive. And the personal private information about that child, about their family, perhaps about caregivers and foster parents have to be balanced as well. And so we really appreciate the extent to which the department is working to balance those competing interests. And we're very hopeful that by the time the budget's put to bed, we will have been able to come up with something that balances those two significant competing interests.
And the whole point around transparency in near fatalities is really to make sure that we have enough information, appropriate information, to protect the child on a go-forward basis.
Absolutely.
Okay. All right. Thank you. We will hold those items open. Moving on to number 4 and 5, let's take the two budget change proposals up together. First one dealing with Assembly Bill 1978, Child Welfare, Social Worker Empowerment, and Foster Child Protection Act.
It's a long one. Greg Rose for the department. Given the hard stop time at 4, let me be brief. This request is for $129,000 of total funds, $42,000 general fund for one permanent staff service manager to develop, implement, and oversee a process for receiving confidential disclosures from county social workers as required by that very long title that you just said. Simply put, these resources will develop these policies and protocols, conduct inquiries, and organize departmental resources to understand and address these complaints and to draft a a legislative report. Given the heavy lifts that we've described in the BCP document itself and that we've talked about today, resources can't be reallocated for this purpose.
And can you give us a quick timeline on implementation? I
can. Relative to implementation, the recruit and hire documents are ready to go, assuming we can get approval. By September 2015, we would expect to conclude our work group process with labor and with CWDA. By November 2015, we would expect to have our implementation plan finalized. And on January 2016, we should be ready to go to receive and process the information that could come in through the law.
Thank you. Finance? LAO?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Brian Euler from the LAO. On regards to item 5, the ICANN mandate, our concerns are laid out on your agenda, so I won't reiterate them. I just wanted to make one point about the amount of funding, and I appreciate that the administration has noted that this amount is based on the claims that have been submitted by counties thus far. I just wanted to read it. We've heard testimony from the counties now in multiple other subcommittees and other venues that they have some concerns about this amount of funding. And because this is a voluntary program, it requires county opt-in. Finding the sweet spot in terms of the right amount of funding to get all the counties to participate will be an important part of the discussion with the counties.